When most people hear the word malnutrition, they'll think of situations where there's a food shortage, an extreme food shortage, like a famine. And although that does happen and it's tragic, that's not the main case for malnutrition. Malnutrition's happening where some kid doesn't get the right diet, gets some diarrheal episode, and their gut, including the microbiome part of their gut, is inflamed, and so they're not able to take advantage of the food. And so with our African scientists, we looked at twins where one twin would do well and one wouldn't, and then took samples to understand, okay, exactly what's going on and how do you stop that? And so it's partly micronutrients that are missing, things like iron, zinc, vitamin A. It's partly a lack of protein. And so we have a variety of ways of intervening, some of which are very inexpensive. Of course, a critical period for nutrition, before you're born, your mother's nutrition affects your entire life, how your brain and body develops. And so one of the exciting new interventions is giving pregnant mothers additional vitamins. We've always traditionally given them iron and folic acid, but by adding 4 others, which is only a few dollars per pregnancy, we see that the health of the mother and the health of the baby are substantially improved.
Some of these interventions, as you mentioned, are being implemented right now. It's a big problem on a big scale. What else is needed?
The challenges, whether it's malnutrition or malaria, they're not quite as visible to the entire world that should pitch in as it should be. And particularly right now, where the world's very focused on, we've got a war in Ukraine, we've got unrest in the Middle East, the focus on helping the continent where, there's the most young people and the most growth and therefore the most potential, I'd say that's quite a bit down from where we were before the pandemic. And we see that not just in understanding the health issues, but helping out with the debts and the debt payments that many African countries have, or even the aid levels. Aid to Africa is the lowest portion of aid that it's been in history. One topic people do pay attention to is climate change. And so, there's an important connection in the report where we say, if you feel bad about climate change, what should you do? Well, these nutritional interventions are the highest impact thing to help the adaptation, to minimize the damage. And that area of climate adaptation doesn't get enough effort. And then figuring out, okay, within that, given that resources are so limited, what are the things that should be done to help these children?
How can we ensure that aid for malnutrition or nutrition in general, actually, does not continue to decline, and especially given the other global challenges like inflation, conflict, and economic disasters?
No, that is a big dilemma. And, partly voices in Africa, do need to be in the lead on talking about the debt challenges and what they hope to see there, what they hope to see in terms of getting aid back to where it was on a sort of pure moral basis. All of these things deserve to be funded. And, we're not talking about a high percentage of rich countries' budgets. It's less than 1%. The goal that was set was to be at 0.7% of the economy as aid. And unfortunately, even though many countries were there, they've cut back now. The UK is cut, even though they are very generous still. Germany's cut. despite they're very generous. France has cut, even though they're very generous. So the trends are troubling, and the lack of visibility is troubling. And the community who cares about this, including the great African leaders and innovators, we need to figure out how to get more attention, and therefore prioritization.
In the report, you write that it is possible to jumpstart a second global health boom by getting kids the right nutrients. What do you mean by that?
Well, if you take the period, say 2000 to when the pandemic started, the world should be very proud of what took place. The African primary healthcare systems adopted new vaccines. Heroic work got those vaccines out to more kids. Those vaccines reduced pneumonia, they reduced diarrhea. We had malaria interventions, bed nets. We had to go through multiple generation, but those were delivered. And that's why the childhood death was cut in half. And unfortunately, then we got the pandemic, and the aid to Africa went down and the interest rates in Africa went up. So these last 3 or 4 years, we've been on a plateau. The miracle of 2000 to say 2019 has stopped. It hasn't gotten worse, although in a few cases, yes, but net, we're kind of just holding ground. And so what we're asking for, which yes does show a sense of optimism, because the world is very distracted, and getting the debt relief and getting these aid levels back to where they were, as we're raising money for the Child Nutrition Fund, for Gavi that funds the vaccines, for Global Fund, we're finding it more difficult. We're not able to raise even the same amount as we raised in the past. And to me, that's tragic. It's a misallocation of resources. Resources are short, but these are cases where you're saving lives for a few thousand per life saved. And particularly through nutrition, you're creating the human resource, which is the future of not just the individuals, but these countries as well. It's those young, innovative Africans that'll allow these economies over time to reach, middle income or, even higher levels.
Now, there are countries like Brazil, India, Kenya, and Rwanda that seem to be moving in the right direction. It's mentioned in the report. What specific strategies do you think have been most successful in repairing their food systems, at least attempted to do so, in combating malnutrition? And how can these models be adapted to other regions or countries?
Productivity in the agricultural system is very necessary. And, Africa today has about a quarter of the productivity of, say, Europe or the US. And, we see India and China getting to the same level as Europe and the US. So, now that has to happen for Africa as well. A few of the inputs like fertilizer are imported. And so the financial conditions make that tough. So there's a lot of ideas about, okay, can we make fertilizer in Africa? Are there techniques that reduce the amount of fertilizer that we need? So agricultural productivity is very high on the list. And some of these interventions, like for pregnant women, fortunately we do have this idea of pregnant women coming in during their pregnancy and getting various advice or vitamins. That's well established. And so if we just add more vitamins, the so-called MMS, to those visits, we don't have to change that overall system. And so that, actually is one of the most straightforward things that we can do. This work on chickens, making the chicken genetics so that these chickens have bigger eggs, more eggs, live longer. I saw that work both in Ethiopia and Nigeria when I was there last week. So that's amazing because it helps particularly women's income, and their kids get more protein. And we see in this malnutrition understanding, it's partly these micronutrients, zinc, iron, vitamin A, but it's also that if you don't have enough protein in your diet, the chance that you'll get this inflammation that then means you stop growing is very, very high.
Malnutrition is clearly one of the urgencies that the world is confronted with. What are some of the funding priorities for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in the next 5-6 years?
Yeah, so our foundation, we spend a lot of money on innovation and, understanding, there's still some things about malnutrition that are not fully understood. So we'll continue to partner with African scientists to try different interventions and understand what works. So we do a lot of research, new vaccines and malnutrition. And then we're a partner with the other donors on delivery. And, so making sure that Gavi's able to raise money, making sure Global Fund's able to raise money. We are one of the donors to those funds, but we cannot fund all of those delivery things, and so we need those partners to stay strong with us. Any health challenge that we face, if you take a 10 to 20 year time frame, I'm very optimistic. Even tough things like HIV or can we eventually have enough tools to not only reduce malaria deaths, but actually try to eradicate malaria? If you take the right time frame, we are funding great scientists today. We have collaborators in Africa who are figuring out new ways to kill mosquitoes or to make mosquitoes so they don't actually carry malaria. That won't be rolled out in the next 5 years in a big way, but we're taking a very long-term view. So, as Africa's developing its capacities and growing its economy, you can have, even though the short run is very challenged, you can have an optimistic view, and we're a partner with these countries, and that's why I'm there, listening and figuring out how we can help.